My name is Clara Mitchell, am 32 years old, and am standing next to a champagne tower at the Riverside Country Club in Greenwich, Connecticut, watching my father destroy me in front of 200 people. Hez holding a microphone, his face flushed from expensive wine, and he just called me his useless daughter. Not quietly, not as a joke between family, into a microphone, at his 40th wedding anniversary party. My stepmother looks mortified, my stepbrother smirks from across the room, and the silence that follows his words feels like drowning. But here's what nobody in this room knows, what my father has no idea about as he laughs off his cruelty like it's nothing. I've been planning this exact moment for 6 years. Before I tell you how I became the second largest shareholder in my father's $30 million company without him knowing, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that like button because this story is for you. Subscribe if you want to see how patience, strategy, and a little bit of revenge can change everything. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens when I finally speak up. Now, let me take you back to where this all started. Growing up in the shadow of my father's success was like living in permanent twilight. Richard Mitchell built his manufacturing company from absolutely nothing back in the 80s, turning a small machine shop into a regional powerhouse that employed 73 people and generated millions in annual revenue. I remember being a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, sitting on the factory floor while he showed me how the equipment worked, his hands stained with grease, his eyes bright with pride. Back then, I thought I'd grow up to run that company with him. Back then, I didn't know that dreams could have expiration dates based on your gender. Everything changed when I was 10, and my mother left. She didn't leave because of another man or some dramatic reason you see in movies. She left because my father's business consumed everything, left no room for anything else, and she was tired of being married to a company instead of a person. I didn't understand it then. I do now. What I understood even less was how quickly my father replaced her. 18 months after the divorce papers were signed, he married Patricia Holbrook, a woman who came with her own baggage in the form of a 9-year-old son named Trevor. Suddenly, I wasn't just dealing with losing my mother. I was dealing with becoming invisible in my own home. Trevor was everything my father apparently wanted in a child. Athletic where I was bookish, charming where I was quiet, confident where I was careful. He played varsity football in high school, dated the homecoming queen, got into Yale on a combination of decent grades and my father's substantial donations. Meanwhile, I spent my teenage years buried in business journals and financial reports, teaching myself everything I could about supply chain management and operational efficiency. I thought if I could just prove myself smart enough, strategic enough, valuable enough, my father would see me the way he saw Trevor. I was 16 when I learned that lesson the hard way. I spent 3 months researching and writing a detailed proposal to modernize the company's supply chain. I analyzed every step of the process, identified inefficiencies, calculated potential cost savings down to the dollar. It was 70 pages long, professionally bound, complete with charts and projections. I presented it at a family dinner, so nervous my hands shook as I slid the document across the table. My father flipped through maybe 3 pages before pushing it back. He didn't say it was bad, he just laughed, this patronizing chuckle that made Patricia smile and Trevor snicker into his pasta. "That's nice, honey," he said. "Maybe focus on your homework instead of business stuff. Trevor will handle this kind of thing someday." I was 16 years old, and I'd just been told my best work was a cute hobby, while my stepbrother's future was already secured. The favoritism only got worse as we got older. High school graduation arrived, and my father gave Trevor a brand new Mercedes sedan, silver with leather interior, a $50,000 prize for mediocre grades and good football stats. I graduated as salutatorian with a 4.2 GPA and received a check for $500. $500. Patricia made a big show of how practical it was, how I could put it toward college expenses. What she didn't mention was that my father had already told me he wouldn't pay for a private university education for me. "Too expensive," he said. "State school is fine for what you'll probably do." Trevor, of course, got Yale fully funded, including a generous monthly allowance for expenses. So, I went to state school. I worked 2 part-time jobs throughout college, one at a bookstore and another doing data entry for a local firm, because my father's definition of support was paying tuition and nothing else. I learned to live on ramen noodles and library coffee, while Trevor sent me occasional texts from New Haven about his fraternity parties and spring break trips to Cancun. I graduated with honors and an MBA by the time I was 25. Trevor graduated with a gentleman's C average and a lot of stories. But when we both came home that summer, guess which one of us my father called his pride and joy at the family barbecue? Hint, it wasn't the one with the advanced degree. I spent those years building something my father couldn't see. I built resilience. I built knowledge. I built a tolerance for being underestimated that would serve me better than he could possibly imagine. And I built something else too, something quiet and dangerous. I built determination, not the kind that burns hot and flames out fast, the kind that settles into your bones and waits, the kind that plans. Because even at 25, watching my father toast Trevor's meaningless degree while ignoring my meaningful one, I knew something he didn't. Patience isn't weakness. It's strategy. 5 years before that anniversary party, I stood in the lobby of Mitchell Manufacturing with a leather portfolio and a stomach full of hope. I'd applied for a junior analyst position through the normal channels, submitted my resume without mentioning my last name, made it through 3 rounds of interviews based purely on merit. The HR director loved my ideas about operational efficiency. The department head called my financial projections brilliant. I'd made it to the final interview, and that's when everything fell apart, because the final interview was with my father. He didn't recognize my qualifications when he saw my name on the folder. He saw nepotism, saw potential accusations of favoritism, saw a problem instead of a solution. We sat in his corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the factory floor, and I presented my vision for the role. I showed him cost-cutting measures that wouldn't sacrifice quality. I demonstrated how updated inventory management could save them hundreds of thousands annually. I gave him everything except what he wanted, which was apparently for me to not exist as a professional person. I can't have people thinking I'm playing favorites, he said, not meeting my eyes. This isn't a charity. The position needs to go to someone without complications. The complications, of course, were just me being his daughter. They had nothing to do with my actual qualifications. The position went to an external candidate with 2 years less experience and a degree from a school that wasn't even regionally accredited. I smiled and said, I understood. I went home to my apartment and allowed myself exactly 1 hour of crying before I pulled myself together and started looking at other options. That hurt, but it was manageable. What happened 2 weeks later was the kind of betrayal that changes you at a cellular level. Trevor had just graduated from Yale with his mediocre grades and expensive education, had majored in something vague like American Studies, had no business experience whatsoever, couldn't read a financial statement if his life depended on it. My father created a position for him out of thin air, Vice President of Strategic Development. I saw the announcement in the company newsletter that I still received because I'd interned there one summer during college. Vice President. Strategic Development. Both words Trevor couldn't even define if you asked him directly. The position came with a 6-figure salary, a company car, and an office 3 doors down from my father's. The company held a dinner at an upscale steakhouse downtown to celebrate Trevor's appointment. I was invited as an afterthought, the kind of invitation that comes via text message 2 days before the event. I went because some part of me still hoped for acknowledgement, still believed that maybe my father would mention my recent interview, would say something about how I'd be joining the team soon too. Instead, I sat at the far end of the table between a junior accountant and someone's spouse, while my father stood and gave a toast that made my insides turn to ice. To my son, he said, raising a glass of bourbon that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The future of this company. Everything I built has been waiting for someone like you to take it to the next level. Patricia beamed like head announced a Nobel Prize. Trevor had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, but not enough to say anything about how I'd just been rejected for a junior position while he landed a VP role. The whole table applauded. Someone asked Trevor about his vision for the role. He gave some nonsense answer about synergy and leveraging core competencies, business buzzwords Head picked up from cable news. Everyone nodded like Head shared profound wisdom. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried for the second time in 2 weeks. This time it was different though. This time the tears came with clarity. I looked at myself in that gilt-edged mirror, mascara smudged, eyes red, and I made a decision that would change the trajectory of everything. I dried my face, I fixed my makeup, I went back to that table and I smiled through dessert. And I decided that I was done hoping for my father to see my value. I was going to make him see it whether he wanted to or not. That's when something unexpected happened. As people were gathering coats and saying goodbyes, the company's CFO approached me near the coat check. Her name was Beatrice Hayes, a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. She'd been with the company for 20 years, had helped build it from a small operation into what it was. She pressed a business card into my hand and leaned close enough that no one else could hear. "Your supply chain proposal from that dinner 5 years ago," she said quietly. "I found it in your father's files when I was looking for something else. It was brilliant. Every single projection you made was accurate. The company would have saved millions if Head listened." She squeezed my hand once, brief and firm. "Call me when you're ready to stop being invisible." Then she was gone, disappeared into the parking lot before I could even process what she'd said. I stood there holding that business card like it was a winning lottery ticket, because in a way, it was. Beatrice Hayes had just offered me something more valuable than a job or an apology. She'd offered me an ally, someone who saw what I could do and understood what was being wasted. I put that card in my wallet and didn't take it out for 3 months. But when I finally called, everything started to change. The coffee shop where I met Beatrice was in downtown Hartford, far enough from Greenwich that we wouldn't run into anyone who knew my father. It was a Tuesday morning in October, leaves turning gold outside the windows, steam rising from overpriced lattes. Beatrice looked different outside the corporate environment, less formal, more dangerous somehow. She got straight to the point before I'd even added sugar to my coffee. "Your father's company is dying," she said. "Not quickly, not obviously, but it's dying, and he's too stubborn to see it." She pulled out a tablet and showed me financial reports I shouldn't have been seeing. Confidential data that could get her fired or sued or both. Profit margins declining 3% year over year for the past 4 years. Customer retention down 18%. Employee turnover up 40%. My father's refusal to modernize, to adapt to digital transformation, to listen to anyone's advice including hers, was systematically destroying what Head spent 40 years building. Trevor's promotion hadn't helped. If anything, his incompetent decisions were accelerating the decline. Beatrice had been fighting this battle from inside for years and losing every single fight. "I can't fix this from inside," she said, closing the tablet and looking at me directly. "Your father doesn't respect my opinion because I'm a woman, even though I've proven my value 1,000 times. He definitely won't respect yours because you're his daughter and he's decided you're not worth listening to. But you could fix it from outside." She let that sit between us for a moment before continuing. "3 of the original business partners are frustrated. They've watched your father become arrogant and reckless. They're considering selling their shares. If you could secure capital, I could help you acquire those shares quietly, before your father even knows what's happening." The idea was so audacious it made my head spin. I didn't have that kind of money. I was making $58,000 a year at a consulting firm in Boston, living in a 400-square-foot apartment, still paying off student loans. The kind of capital needed to buy significant shares in a multi-million-dollar company was completely beyond my reach. I told Beatrice this, expecting her to realize she'd miscalculated, that I wasn't the solution she thought I was. Instead, she smiled. "Then earn it," she said simply. "I'll wait." "How long?" I asked. "As long as it takes. The company's decline is slow. We have time. And watching your father realize his useless daughter owns a chunk of his company? That'll be worth the wait." I left that coffee shop with a mission that seemed impossible. I needed to earn approximately $2 million while working a mid-level job in a competitive field. I needed to do it without anyone in my family knowing what I was planning, and I needed to do it fast enough that the company would still be worth saving when I succeeded. So I did what I'd been doing my whole life. I worked. But this time I worked with purpose that went beyond proving my worth. I worked with a goal that had a finish line. I took a position at a competitor firm in Boston, 3 hours away from Greenwich, far enough that I wouldn't run into family at the grocery store, close enough that I could attend quarterly family dinners and keep up appearances. The job was brutal, 80-hour weeks analyzing supply chains for companies across the Northeast. I lived on coffee and takeout. I saved every penny beyond basic survival expenses. I invested aggressively in the stock market, spent my few free hours studying trading patterns and financial trends. I took risks that terrified me because playing it safe wouldn't get me where I needed to go. My father called once every few months, usually because Patricia reminded him to. The conversations followed the same script. How's Boston? Fine. How's work? Fine. Your brother just landed a major client. That's great. We're having dinner next month. Will you come? I'll try. He never asked what I actually did, never expressed interest in my career beyond whether I was employed. Meanwhile, I attended those quarterly family dinners and watched Trevor make mistake after expensive mistake. He launched a marketing campaign that cost the company $2 million and generated 0 new clients. My father brushed it off. Has learning, that's what matters. When I accidentally mentioned a successful project at my firm, my father changed the subject within 30 seconds. 2 years into this plan, I'd saved and invested my way to $300,000. It felt simultaneously like a fortune, and nowhere near enough. I needed something bigger, riskier, faster. That's when I joined a startup as chief operating officer, accepting mostly equity compensation instead of a high salary. The startup developed supply chain management software, and the irony wasn't lost on me. I was building the exact solution I'd proposed to my father at 16. I worked 20-hour days. I slept in the office more nights than I slept at home. I missed family dinners and didn't care anymore. 18 months later, the startup was acquired by a larger tech company. My equity became worth $4.2 million after taxes. I was 30 years old, sitting in a lawyer's office in Boston, looking at a number on a screen that represented 6 years of sacrifice and strategy. I'd done it. I'd earned the capital I needed. Now, I just had to decide whether I actually wanted to go through with the plan. Whether humbling my father was worth the nuclear fallout it would create in my family. I thought about that for approximately 30 seconds before texting Beatrice. I'm ready, let's do this. I drove home to Connecticut on a Friday afternoon in June, with financial statements and acquisition paperwork in my passenger seat. My plan was to tell my father about my success privately before Trevor's engagement party that evening. Not to brag, not to demand anything, just to show him that I'd built something significant, that maybe he'd misjudged me all these years. Some pathetic part of me still wanted his pride, his acknowledgement that I was more than the useless daughter he'd never quite said out loud but always implied. I found him in his study at the house, the same study where he'd dismissed my supply chain proposal 14 years earlier. He was reviewing company finances, his reading glasses perched on his nose, stress visible in the lines around his eyes. The company's struggles were taking a toll even if he wouldn't admit it publicly. I knocked on the door frame. Dad, do you have a minute? I have something important to share with you. He glanced up briefly. Sure, honey. What's up? He didn't invite me to sit. Didn't close the folder he was reviewing. I started explaining. The startup. The acquisition. The $4 million I'd earned through strategic planning and hard work. I showed him the financial statements. Proof that I hadn't just gotten lucky but had made smart decisions consistently over 6 years. I was hoping for surprise, for pride, for some sign that he saw me differently now. Instead, he interrupted me halfway through. That's nice, honey. Did you bring a date tonight? Your brother's getting engaged, you know? The dismissal was so casual it took me a moment to process. I tried again. Dad, I'm trying to tell you something important about business strategy and financial success. He sighed like I was bothering him. I'm busy right now. Well, talk later. Later never came. The engagement party started at 7. 200 guests at the family estate, the same place where I'd grown up, now redecorated to Patricia's tastes, until I barely recognized it. Trevor was marrying a woman named Bethany Collins, someone who'd gone to Yale with him and shared his casual cruelty disguised as charm. The party was elaborate, expensive, perfect. Trevor announced the engagement with Bethany, crying happy tears beside him. My father gave a speech that made my chest tight with old wounds reopened. "My son has made me so proud," he said to thunderous applause. "Has taking the company to new heights, building a legacy I can be confident in. Every success he achieves reminds me that I did something right as a father." The reality was that under Trevor's leadership, company profits had declined 12%. They'd lost 6 major clients. Employee morale was at an all-time low, according to Beatrice's reports. But my father saw what he wanted to see, which was his son succeeding and his daughter being irrelevant. Patricia announced they were gifting the couple a house worth $1.5 million. Guests oohed and awed. Bethany cried some more. Trevor looked appropriately humble while accepting a gift that cost 3 times what I'd earned in my first 5 years of working. I stepped outside for air and overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. My father and his brother Gerald were smoking cigars on the terrace. "What about Clara?" Gerald asked. "She seems sharp, Richard. Have you thought about bringing her into the company?" My father's laugh carried across the lawn. "She's fine doing whatever she does in Boston." "This company needs strong leadership," Gerald pressed. "You mean it needs a son?" My father didn't deny it, just took another puff of his cigar and changed the subject. That was the moment I stopped feeling conflicted. That was the moment I pulled out my phone and texted Beatrice. "I'm ready. Let's move forward with acquiring the shares. I don't care about the family fallout anymore." She responded within seconds. "I'll set up the meetings. It's time." I went back inside, smiled through dessert, congratulated Trevor and Bethany, and left early claiming a headache. I drove back to Boston and didn't look back. The next phase had begun, and this time I wasn't playing for his approval. I was playing to win. The conference room in a Manhattan law office was deliberately nondescript, the kind of place where deals happen that powerful people don't want noticed. I sat across from 3 men who'd helped my father build Mitchell Manufacturing 40 years ago. Frank Peterson, Lawrence Bennett, and Stanley Morrison. All in their late 60s now, all successful beyond what they'd imagined as young entrepreneurs. And all 3 deeply frustrated with what my father had become. Arrogant, stubborn, unwilling to adapt to changing markets. They'd watched him prioritize pride over profit, nepotism over competence. They'd offered advice countless times and been ignored every single time. I presented my business plan over the course of 2 hours. Digital transformation strategies, client retention programs, operational efficiency improvements, updated supply chain management. Every proposal was backed by data, by case studies, by projections that showed exactly how Mitchell Manufacturing could not just survive but thrive in a modern marketplace. I showed them the company's current trajectory under my father's leadership, the slow decline that would become catastrophic within 5 years if nothing changed. Then I showed them my 5-year plan, the numbers that proved turnaround was possible with the right leadership. Frank leaned back in his chair when I finished, studying me with eyes that had evaluated thousands of business deals. "You're good," he said finally. "Really good. Your father's an idiot for not seeing it." Lawrence nodded agreement. "The question is, what happens when he finds out his daughter owns 31% of his company? Because Richard doesn't handle challenges to his authority well." I met their eyes steadily. "Let him explode. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this to save what he built before his ego destroys it completely." Stanley, who'd been quiet until then, smiled. "That's the right answer. Let's talk numbers." The negotiation took 3 weeks. $6.8 million for 31% ownership. Their combined shares sold as a single block. I had $4.2 million from my startup acquisition. I needed to secure an additional $2.6 million. The risk was enormous. I took out a business loan using my current assets as collateral, betting everything I'd earned on this gamble. Beatrice co-signed the loan privately, putting her own financial security on the line because she believed in my vision. The legal paperwork alone took another 2 weeks. We structured everything through a shell LLC to maintain anonymity. My name appeared nowhere on the public documents, just an investment firm acquiring shares. When the paperwork finalized, my father received a legal notice that 3 partners had sold their shares, but nothing about who'd bought them. He tried to buy the shares back through company funds. The LLC refused. He tried to negotiate. We stayed silent. I watched from a distance as he grew increasingly frustrated with this mysterious investment group that wouldn't communicate. It must have driven him crazy, losing control of nearly a third of his company to faceless entities. But the transactions were legal, airtight, irreversible. The math of ownership shifted overnight. My father retained 37%. Patricia owned 10%, a gift had given her years ago. Trevor owned 8%, another gift. Small investors held the remaining 14%. I now controlled 31%, second only to my father, with enough influence to block major decisions. But I didn't reveal myself, not yet. Beatrice advised patience. Let him make more mistakes. Let the board see what you already know. Wait for the perfect moment. So I waited. For the next 2 years, I lived a double life. In Boston, I was a successful consultant, building my reputation and my bank account. At quarterly board meetings, I attended remotely as the representative of the LLC investment firm, never turning on my camera, speaking only when necessary to vote on proposals. I watched my father struggle. I watched Trevor get promoted to senior VP, despite losing a client worth $5 million annually. I watched the company take out a $12 million loan to cover operational losses. I said nothing, just took detailed notes and waited. Family dinners became surreal experiences. My father would complain about the mysterious investment group interfering with his vision. He'd rant about outsiders who didn't understand his business buying their way in for profit. I'd nod sympathetically and pass the potatoes. Trevor would mock the investors for not understanding his strategic approach. I'd bite my tongue hard enough to taste blood. Patricia would say the investors were probably jealous of their success. I'd excuse myself to the bathroom and laugh silently at the irony. Thanksgiving dinner, 2 years after the acquisition, brought the third betrayal that sealed my resolve. My father stood at the head of the table and announced that Trevor would be the next CEO when he retired in 5 years. The company needs family leadership, he declared. Real family who understands the legacy we're building. I couldn't stay silent this time. Dad, have you considered other options? The company needs fresh perspective, modern strategies. His response was sharp. The company needs family, real family who understands the business. The emphasis on real family made Patricia smile. Stepmom added her own cut. Some people are meant to lead, others to follow. It's just nature. I excused myself and walked outside into the November cold. My Uncle Gerald followed a few minutes later, hands in his pockets, breath fogging in the air. I know what you did, he said quietly. The shares, Beatrice told me. You're the LLC. I froze. Are you going to tell him? Gerald laughed. Hell no. It's about time someone taught Richard a lesson. Hes destroying what we all built together, and Hes too proud to see it. When are you going to reveal yourself? I thought about it. Soon, I said. When it'll hurt the most. Good, Gerald said. I'll be ready to back you when you do. The convention center in Hartford was decorated for celebration. 400 guests gathered to commemorate 40 years of Mitchell manufacturing. My father had spared no expense, hiring a film crew to produce a documentary-style video about the company's history. I attended with my boyfriend Marcus Thompson, a patient man who'd been trying to understand my complicated family dynamics for 8 months. He knew I had issues with my father, but not the extent of them. He was about to find out. The lights dimmed and the video began. 40 minutes of carefully edited history showing my father's journey from struggling entrepreneur to successful business owner. Footage of the original facility, interviews with longtime employees, dramatic music underscoring each triumph. The founding partners appeared, younger versions of Frank, Lawrence, and Stanley talking about the early days. Patricia featured prominently. described as the supportive partner who believed in the vision, despite only entering the picture 23 years into the company's 40-year history. Trevor appeared in at least 15 separate segments, shown learning the business, making decisions, representing the future. I appeared in 0 seconds of the 40-minute video. Not a single photograph. Not one mention of my name. Not even in crowd shots from family events held at the company. It'd been systematically erased from the company's history like it never existed. Marcus leaned over and whispered, "This is messed up. Where are you?" I kept my voice steady. Nowhere. Nowhere. Because, as far as my father's concerned, I never mattered enough to include. After the video, my father took the stage for a speech. He thanked everyone imaginable. The founding partners who had helped him start the journey. The employees who had built the products. The clients who'd trusted them. Patricia for her unwavering support. Trevor for carrying the torch into the future. He thanked the catering staff. He thanked the venue coordinator. He thanked people whose names I didn't even recognize. He never said my name once. Not once in a 30-minute speech about family and legacy and gratitude. People who knew me looked uncomfortable. Former employees who remembered me visiting the factory as a child avoided eye contact. Marcus squeezed my hand, furious on my behalf. "Your dad is unbelievable," he whispered. "How are you this calm?" "Because I've had 32 years to get used to being invisible," I told him. "But I won't be invisible much longer." He looked at me quizzically, but I just smiled and turned my attention back to the stage. Dinner was worse. The seating chart placed me at a back table far from the family section, surrounded by distant relatives and low-level employees. The family table featured my father, Patricia, Trevor, Trevor's wife Bethany, Uncle Gerald, and several company executives. I was seated between someone's elderly aunt and a junior accountant who looked as uncomfortable as I felt. Marcus started to complain to someone about the seating arrangement, but I stopped him. "It's fine. Let it be." This made him more upset, not less. That's when Bethany's voice carried across the room, intentionally loud. "I don't understand why she even bothers coming to these things." She was talking to the woman next to her but projecting for anyone nearby to hear. "She's so awkward, doesn't fit in with real business people. It's kind of sad, actually." The woman she was talking to looked uncomfortable, but Bethany continued. "Everyone knows she's just here because she's technically family. It's not like she contributes anything." Marcus started to stand up, ready to confront her. I grabbed his arm. "Don't. It's not worth it." But my father had heard the commotion and walked over. Instead of defending me, instead of telling Bethany to show respect, he looked at Marcus and said, "Let's not make a scene." Just like that. Let's not make a scene. As if I was the problem, not the woman publicly humiliating me. Marcus couldn't believe it. "Your daughter deserves respect," he said, his voice tight with anger. My father's response made my blood run cold. "My daughter needs to understand her place, not needs to be respected, needs to understand her place." Like I was overreaching by simply existing in the same room. We left immediately. Marcus drove because I was shaking too hard to trust myself behind the wheel. He kept asking if I was okay. Kept saying he couldn't believe a father would treat his daughter that way. I stared out the window at the Connecticut landscape passing by and felt something shift inside me. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was done. Completely irrevocably done trying to earn respect from people who would never give it. "Why do you let them treat you like that?" Marcus asked. I looked at him and smiled, really smiled for the first time that night. "Not much longer," I promised. "Trust me." That night I called Beatrice. "When's the anniversary party?" "The big one for 40 years of marriage?" 11 months, she said. "They're planning something elaborate at the Riverside Country Club." "Perfect," I told her. "That's when I make my move." We spent the next 11 months preparing. Legal documentation. Strategic planning. I rehearsed what I'd say in front of my bathroom mirror until I could deliver it without emotion. Beatrice coordinated with Uncle Gerald, who agreed to support me publicly when the moment came. Everything was ready. I just had to wait for my father to give me the opening I needed. And knowing him, knowing his casual cruelty and his certainty in his own superiority, I knew he would. I pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Country Club on a Saturday evening in June, exactly 40 years to the day after my father married Patricia. The sun was setting over the Connecticut River, casting gold light across manicured lawns. I'd broken up with Marcus 3 months earlier. He was a good man but couldn't handle being adjacent to my family's dysfunction. I understood. I'd barely handled being in the middle of it for 32 years. Tonight I was alone, which felt appropriate somehow. This confrontation had always been between me and my father. No one else. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. A navy dress that was elegant without being flashy, expensive enough to signal success but not ostentatious. Pearl earrings my biological mother had given me for my college graduation. Heels that added 3 inches to my height because tonight I needed every advantage. I checked my reflection in the car window, lipstick perfect, hair pulled back in a sleek bun, expression calm. No one looking at me would know my heart was racing, that I'd barely slept in 3 days, that everything I'd worked for over 6 years came down to the next few hours. 200 guests filled the ballroom. Ice sculptures flanked the entrance. A champagne tower rose from the center table like a crystal monument to excess. A live band played jazz standards. Waiters circulated with trays of appetizers that probably cost more per piece than my first week's groceries in Boston. My father and Patricia held court at the center of the room, accepting congratulations like royalty. She wore a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He wore a tuxedo and the satisfied smile of a man who believed he'd won at life. I found them in the receiving line and offered appropriate congratulations. Patricia's response was dismissive as always. "Oh, you made it. How nice." My father barely looked at me. "Thanks for coming." No hug, no real acknowledgement, just the bare minimum politeness required in public. I moved on before anyone could comment on the coldness. Trevor and Bethany were working the room like they owned it, which in their minds they probably did. Bethany's dress was designer, her jewelry flashy. Trevor had his father's swagger, that confidence that comes from never being told no. Trevor spotted me near the bar and detoured over with Bethany in tow. "Surprised you could take time off work. What is it you do again?" His tone made it clear he didn't actually care about the answer. "Business consulting," I replied evenly. "Strategic acquisitions, mostly." Bethany snickered. "Sounds boring." Trevor grinned. "I'm running real operations now. Senior VP. Dad says I'll be CEO within 5 years. The implied comparison was obvious. He was important. I was not. It took everything in me to smile politely. "That's wonderful, Trevor. I'm sure you'll do great things." I positioned myself strategically near the champagne tower, central enough to be visible but not intrusive. Across the room, I caught Beatrice's eye. She was here as a senior company officer, required attendance. She gave me the smallest nod. Uncle Gerald was near the band, watching me with barely concealed anticipation. They both knew what was coming. A few other board members were scattered through the crowd, people who'd seen the company's financials and knew the truth behind the celebration facade. Tonight wasn't just about embarrassing my father, it was about revealing truth to people who needed to hear it. My father moved toward the microphone at the head table. The band quieted. Guests gathered around in that expectant hush that precedes speeches at fancy events. Patricia beamed beside him, her hand on his arm. Trevor and Bethany pushed to the front of the crowd. I stayed where I was, one hand resting lightly on the champagne tower table, feeling the cool crystal under my fingers. Everything had planned, everything had worked for, came down to what happened next. My father's speech began with the expected sentiments. 40 years of marriage, Patricia's unwavering support, the joy of building a life together. Some of it was probably even sincere. Then he shifted to the topic I'd been waiting for. He talked about legacy, about family, about what really mattered in life. "And I'm grateful," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom, "that Patricia gave me a son to carry on everything I've built. A son who understands what it means to lead, to make the hard decisions, to be the kind of person a company needs at the helm." Someone in the crowd, one of my father's old college buddies emboldened by whiskey, shouted out, "What about your daughter, Rich?" Nervous laughter rippled through the room. My father's smile faltered for just a second before he recovered. "Oh, she's here somewhere." He scanned the crowd, spotted me standing by the champagne tower. There she is. My daughter does, well, she tries her best. More nervous laughter, people not sure if they should be amused or uncomfortable. Patricia tugged at his sleeve, a warning he ignored. Not everyone is cut out for business, he continued, warming to his theme now, the champagne removing his usual filter. Some people are just meant to be, I don't know. Trevor's voice cut through the pause, loud and gleeful. Supporting characters. The room erupted in laughter, louder this time, people feeling permission to join in. My father laughed too, pointing at Trevor in acknowledgement. Sure, supporting characters. That works. He looked directly at me now, still laughing. My useless daughter. He said it. Actually said those two words into a microphone in front of 200 people. The laughter died almost instantly. Gasps replaced it. Uncle Gerald's face went red with fury. Beatrice shook her head in disgust. Patricia looked pleased. Trevor was grinning like he'd won something. The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye in the room swiveled between my father and me, waiting to see how I'd react. Would I cry? Would I leave? Would I pretend I hadn't heard? My father seemed to realize he'd crossed a line because he tried to laugh it off. Oh, she knows, I'm joking. Right, honey? His tone was patronizing, dismissive, expecting me to smile and play along like I always had. But I didn't smile. I stepped away from the champagne tower and started walking toward the microphone. Actually, Dad, I said, my voice carrying in the stunned silence, I don't think you are joking, and I think we need to have a conversation. Right now, in front of everyone. I crossed the ballroom floor with every eye tracking my movement. My father looked annoyed more than concerned. Honey, I'm in the middle of something. The microphone was still in his hand, but I reached out and took it. My fingers steady despite the adrenaline screaming through my veins. He was too surprised to resist. Patricia hissed something under her breath. Trevor started to move forward, but Uncle Gerald blocked his path with a subtle shift of position. Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate my father and stepmother, I began, my voice clear and calm. 40 years is a long time. A lot can happen in 40 years. You can build a successful company from nothing. You can raise a family. You can also slowly destroy everything you built through stubbornness, ego, and willful blindness. The room went from silent to electric. My father reached for the microphone, but I turned away. Dad, you just called me your useless daughter. To everyone here. Not in private, not as an accident. You said it into a microphone because you actually believe it. That's enough, he said, his face reddening. But I was just getting started. No, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. Because you've been calling me useless my entire life. Never directly, sure, but through every action and decision you've ever made regarding me. When I was 16, I wrote a comprehensive supply chain modernization proposal. 70 pages of research and analysis. You laughed at it. Told me to focus on homework instead of business stuff. Several people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some of them had been at that dinner. When I graduated with honors and an MBA, you refused to hire me for a junior analyst position. Said it would look like favoritism. Then you created a VP role out of thin air for Trevor 2 weeks later. Trevor started to protest, but I kept going. When I achieved success in Boston, built a career, made strategic investments that turned $4 million in profit, you dismissed it in 30 seconds because you were too busy to listen. You erased me from the company's 40-year documentary. Not one photo. Not one mention. As far as your version of history is concerned, I simply don't exist. My voice was rising now, emotion breaking through despite my efforts at control. You seated me at the back of the room at your last celebration. You allowed Bethany to publicly humiliate me while you told me to know my place. And tonight you called me useless in front of 200 people and expected me to smile and take it. This is inappropriate, Trevor shouted. Inappropriate? I turned to face him. You want to know what's inappropriate? Losing $17 million in revenue over the past 3 years. Running the company's profit margins down 28%, increasing employee turnover by 45% because your management style drives good people away. That's inappropriate. The crowd began murmuring. Board members were nodding. My father's face had gone from red to pale. How do you know those numbers? Those are confidential. I reached into my small purse and pulled out an envelope I'd been carrying all night. I know those numbers, Dad, because I'm not the useless daughter you think I am. I'm the person who's been paying attention while you destroyed what you built. 3 years ago, 3 of your original business partners sold their shares. Frank, Lawrence, and Stanley. You tried to buy the shares back, but the mysterious LLC that purchased them wouldn't sell. You've been furious about outside investors interfering with your company ever since. I dropped the envelope on the table beside him. The papers inside proved everything. I'm the LLC. I own 31% of Mitchell Manufacturing. I've owned it for 3 years. The ballroom erupted. Shouts of disbelief. Trevor lunged forward. That's impossible. That's a lie. Beatrice stepped forward from the crowd, her voice cutting through the chaos. It's not a lie. I facilitated the transaction. Everything is legal and properly documented. Uncle Gerald moved to stand beside me. So did I. Your father's daughter has been saving his company while he's been destroying it. The 3 founding partners, Frank, Lawrence, and Stanley, pushed through the crowd. Frank spoke first. We sold to her because we trusted her vision more than yours, Richard. She presented a business plan that could actually save this company instead of running it into the ground. My father grabbed the papers with shaking hands. He read through them, his eyes scanning legal documents that confirmed everything. It said, his name, my name, share percentages, all legal, all binding, all true. You went behind my back. His voice was barely a whisper. I met his eyes steadily. You mean I invested in a failing company that you were too proud to save? I bought those shares with money I earned myself. Money I made while you called me useless and gave everything to someone who's proven incompetent at every turn. I turned to address the full room, particularly the employees and board members scattered throughout. In 3 years under Trevor's leadership, profit margins declined 28%. Employee turnover increased 45%. We lost 6 major clients worth a combined $32 million annually. Dad took out a $12 million loan last year just to cover operational losses. I distributed the financial printouts Beatrice had prepared. Hard evidence of everything I was claiming. All of this happened because my father was too stubborn to adapt to modern business practices and too biased to recognize talent standing right in front of him. Trevor tried to grab the microphone. You have no idea what you're talking about. These are complex situations you couldn't possibly understand. Really? I looked at him directly. Tell everyone about the Johnson contract you lost last month. $8 million in annual revenue, because you refused to negotiate on terms that were completely reasonable. Tell them about the Harris account, the Patterson deal, the systematic failures that have cost this company everything while you played executive in an office you never earned. His wife Bethany tried to defend him. He was standing on principle. Those clients were unreasonable. I almost laughed. He was standing on ego, and it cost everyone in this room their financial security. I turned to the employees scattered through the crowd. How many of you haven't gotten raises in 3 years despite inflation? More than 30 hands went up slowly, then more as people found courage. That's because company profits are being drained by mismanagement and nepotism instead of rewarding actual performance. That's what happens when you promote based on family relationships instead of competence. My father finally found his voice. You can't do this. This is my company. I built this. I looked at him and felt nothing but sadness for what had become. It's not just your company anymore, Dad. It never was. You just acted like it. You've had partners, shareholders, employees who contributed to building this for 40 years. And yes, you started it. You built something incredible. But you're destroying it now because you won't admit when you're wrong and you won't accept help from people you've decided aren't worth listening to. Patricia moved to stand beside him. This is betrayal. Family doesn't do this to family. The hypocrisy was stunning. You mean like calling someone useless at a party? That kind of betrayal? Or erasing them from company history? Or systematically denying them opportunities while handing out executive positions to unqualified family members? Patricia had no response. I laid out the choice as clearly as I could. You have 2 options, Dad. Option 1. You remain CEO, but you implement my modernization plan. I join the company as COO with real authority to make operational decisions. We work together to save what you built. Option 2, we call an emergency shareholder meeting. With my 31% plus Uncle Gerald's support and the proxy votes from Frank, Lawrence, and Stanley, I have enough votes to remove you as CEO and install new leadership. The board members will vote with whoever presents the better plan for the company's future. Based on the last 3 years of financial data, that's me. The room was silent, except for the sound of my father's heavy breathing. He looked around at faces that had been friendly minutes ago, now looking at him with doubt and calculation. He saw employees nodding at my proposals, board members looking intrigued instead of supportive of him, clients who were tired of declining service quality. He was cornered and he knew it. You'd take my company from me? His voice broke on the question. I softened slightly, not out of weakness, but out of truth. I don't want to take it from you. I want to save it. But I can't do that if you keep blocking every attempt at progress because your pride won't let you admit your daughter might know something you don't. The silence stretched. Patricia whispered urgently to him, but he waved her off. Trevor looked like he wanted to argue, but Uncle Gerald's hand on his shoulder kept him quiet. Finally, my father spoke. Fine. Option 1. You can join as COO. Well, implement your plans. His jaw was tight, every word forced. But this doesn't mean I approve of how you did this. I nodded slowly. I stopped needing your approval when I was 16 and you laughed at my proposal. When I was 25 and you wouldn't hire me. When I was 30 and you erased me from your history. This isn't about approval anymore. This is about saving 73 jobs and honoring what you built before ego destroyed it completely. The party dissolved quickly after my revelation. Some guests left immediately, uncomfortable with the family drama they'd witnessed. Others stayed to talk in small groups, processing what had happened. Several board members approached me to discuss implementation timelines. 3 employees thanked me quietly for speaking up. Uncle Gerald hugged me and whispered that I'd done what needed doing. Beatrice squeezed my hand and said she'd always known I had it in me. My father left without speaking to me again, Patricia trailing behind him with Trevor and Bethany close behind. I drove back to my apartment in Boston that night with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, adrenaline finally crashing now that it was over. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. 6 years of planning, sacrifice, and patience had culminated in one explosive moment that changed everything. I didn't know yet whether my father would actually honor our agreement or if he'd find some way to fight me. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was done being invisible. The following Monday, I sat in Mitchell Manufacturing's main conference room for an emergency board meeting. My father sat at the head of the table out of habit, but the dynamic had shifted. I presented my 5-year modernization plan in detail. Digital transformation of inventory management, customer retention programs that address the specific reasons we'd lost major clients, operational efficiency improvements that would cut costs without sacrificing quality, employee development programs to reduce turnover. Every proposal was backed by data, by case studies from successful companies, by financial projections that showed realistic paths to profitability. The board asked tough questions. I had answers for all of them. My father sat silently through most of the presentation, his expression unreadable. Trevor attended but wasn't allowed to vote since his shares weren't enough to grant him a board seat. When the vote came, my plan was approved unanimously. I was officially installed as Chief Operating Officer with authority over daily operations. My father remained CEO but with reduced power over decisions he'd previously made unilaterally. It wasn't the complete victory option 2 would have given me, but it was enough. Implementation began immediately. I moved back to Connecticut and rented an apartment near the company headquarters. The first month was brutal. My father undermined me in subtle ways, made snide comments in meetings, took credit for ideas I presented, but the results started showing quickly. We recovered one major client in the first 6 weeks by addressing their specific concerns about service quality. Employee satisfaction surveys showed measurable improvement when people realized their feedback was actually being considered. Small changes in inventory management saved us $60,000 in the first quarter alone. Trevor was officially demoted from Senior VP to Director of Marketing, a position that better matched his actual capabilities. He fought it viciously, but the board voted 4-1 in favor, with only my father dissenting. Trevor's role became focused on areas where he could actually contribute: social media presence and client entertainment, while strategic decisions went to people with relevant expertise. He treated me with barely concealed hostility, but I didn't care anymore. I wasn't here to make him like me. I was here to save what his incompetence had nearly destroyed. 6 months after the anniversary party, Mitchell Manufacturing's quarterly report showed profit margins up 18%. Employee turnover had dropped by 35%. WED recovered 2 of the 6 major clients WED lost, and were in serious negotiations with 2 others. A regional business journal ran a feature story about our turnaround, calling it a case study in successful corporate restructuring. The article prominently featured my role as the architect of the changes. My father was mentioned, but not as the hero. For once, the narrative acknowledged reality instead of his preferred fiction. I was sitting in my new office when Beatrice stopped by late one afternoon. It was a beautiful space, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the manufacturing floor where Id spent time as a child. "Told you it would work," Beatrice said, settling into a chair across from my desk. I smiled at her. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did." She shook her head. "I didn't believe in you. Belief implies doubt. I knew what you were capable of. There's a difference." That distinction mattered more than she probably realized. Uncle Gerald visited a week later with news from my father. "Richard asked me to tell you something," he said, looking uncomfortable. "He can't quite say it himself yet, but he wanted you to know that he sees what you've done for the company. He sees that you were right about the changes needed. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't acknowledgement of the pain had caused. But coming from my father, who'd never admitted being wrong about anything in his entire life, it was something." "I'm glad the company is recovering," I told Gerald honestly. That was always the goal. The company holiday party that December was smaller than previous years, focused more on employees than external guests. My father approached me near the bar, looking older than I remembered. "The board wants to give you an award," he said stiffly. "Turnaround Executive of the Year or something like that." "That's nice," I replied neutrally. He struggled with his next words, pride warring with something that might have been regret. "What you did was... The company is doing better now. People seem happier with the changes you've made. It wasn't the apology Id deserved for 32 years of dismissal, but it was more than Id expected. Maybe I should have listened to some of your ideas earlier," he continued, not quite meeting my eyes. "Maybe that supply chain proposal when you were 16 had merit I didn't see. I could have gracefully accepted this olive branch. Could have made it easy for him. But I thought about every dismissal, every time he'd chosen Trevor over me, every moment it'd been made to feel worthless by the person who was supposed to value me most. Maybe," I said carefully, "but I'm not that 16-year-old anymore looking for your approval. I'm the COO who saved your legacy when you were too proud to see it needed saving." He nodded slowly. "Yes, you are." It was the closest thing to acknowledgement I'd ever gotten from him. I stepped outside for air as the party continued behind me. The December cold was sharp and clean. I thought about the journey from invisible daughter to powerful executive, from begging for scraps of approval to not needing it anymore. My phone rang. My biological mother, who I'd reconnected with properly over the past 6 months. "I saw the article about the turnaround," she said. "I'm so proud of you." That simple statement from someone who'd never doubted my worth meant more than any grudging admission from my father ever could. "Thanks, Mom. I wish I'd had the courage to do this sooner." "You did it when you were ready," she replied. "That's what counts." Standing there in the cold Connecticut night, looking at the lit windows of the building where I'd once been told I didn't belong, I realized something fundamental had changed. I used to think I needed my father's approval to feel successful, to believe in my own value. I'd spent decades trying to earn recognition from someone who'd decided I wasn't worth recognizing. But building this plan, executing it, saving the company despite his resistance, I'd proven something far more important than my value to him. I'd proven it to myself, and that was the only approval that had ever really mattered. He called me useless. I called his bluff with financial statements, legal documents, and a strategic plan he couldn't deny. I owned my worth literally. With 31% of company shares bought with money it earned through competence Head refused to acknowledge. And figuratively, with the knowledge that I'd saved something Head built even after Head tried his hardest to keep me from contributing. The victory wasn't in his eventual grudging recognition. The victory was in no longer needing it. I'd become the person I'd always been capable of being, and I'd done it despite him rather than because of him. That was worth more than any apology he could never quite bring himself to give. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to prove your worth to family members who refused to see it? Have you been underestimated because of gender, age, or assumptions that had nothing to do with your actual capabilities? Drop a comment below and share your story. This community is here to support each other. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button so more people who need to hear it can find it. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about overcoming family dynamics, building success despite obstacles, and learning that the most important approval is the one you give yourself. Share this with someone who needs to know that being underestimated can become your greatest advantage if you're patient and strategic enough. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that your worth isn't determined by the people who refuse to see it. Sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be, then using that power to fix what their ego destroyed. Keep fighting for yourselves. You're worth it, even when the people closest to you can't see it yet.